First of all, happy Hanukkah, everybody. Tonight is night 3. I hope that you all get a gift every night still, or at least you can give one still. I'm not sure. But a happy holiday. And let me say this, tonight I'm really, really excited. I'm like that all the time, but especially tonight, we have John Cohen, the athletic director of Mississippi State. I happen to live in this region, so we follow Mississippi State. And Jeff Schulman, who's the AD at the University of Vermont. I don't live up there, but we follow it because it is Jeff Schulman, and we love him, and we know what a great leader he is. I can't think of a time, and you guys, thank you for saying yes, that has been more, what's the word? Pick a word. Tumultuous, transformative. We don't even know where it's going to go. An industry that is more topsy-turvy than the collegiate sports business is right now. So I am so glad you guys are going to set us all straight. You're going to let us know exactly what's going to happen. You're going to let us know about the new constitution, the new transformation committee that they have, and you'll let us know all about NIL. You'll let us know what's going to happen in collegiate sports, right? By the time we're done, we will be the most informed group in the nation. Everybody who's on this show will be able to be called for expert witnessing and advice for every talk show in America. There's no high bar here being set. We just know how good you guys are. Okay? So, Arnie?
You want me to take it? All right.
I'm gonna ask you, normally I introduce you guys, and which is nice, but I have literally a page on each of you. So I thought it'd be nice I'm going to start with you, Jeff Schulman, because actually I should start with John, because if I'm reading Hebrew on my screen, it would be right to left. That's Hebrew, right? So John Cohen, just tell us a couple of facts about you that we all should know.
Yeah. So I grew up in a heavily, densely Jewish populated area, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I'm being facetious.
That wasn't joke, right?
My father was a law professor at the University of Alabama. My mother was an educator, a teacher at the high school, 3 sisters. Was fortunate enough to play baseball at Mississippi State. Had a very short professional career in the Minnesota Twins organization. Really got into coaching sheerly just by accident. My path was to go to law school. And in fact, my daughter's in law school. I have 2 uncles who are lawyers, a lot of lawyers. My sister's a lawyer. That was going to be my path. And I kind of caught the coaching bug and just had tremendous relationships with administrators around the country. And after my coaching career was over, I got the great opportunity to be the athletic director at Mississippi State University. So been at many different places, Missouri, Northwestern Louisiana. I was at the University of Florida, the University of Kentucky, and now Mississippi State. And in fact, I've lived in 6 different Southeastern Conference cities. So yeah, that's about it. I'll pass it on to the next person.
Wait, hold on. Before you do that, before you do that, first of all, when you took over Mississippi State, I mean, were there a lot of people that wanted that job?
You talking about the athletic director job, or?
I mean, I'm sure there are people that wanted the job, but it was Mississippi State. I mean, you inherited a bustling program.
Yeah, it's really hard to, in the Southeastern Conference. I think that there are a lot of people who want to be a part of the Southeastern Conference for many reasons. I think it was pretty competitive. Yeah, so. When I became the baseball coach at Mississippi State, that was pretty highly competitive too. One of the great traditional programs in the entire country. So yeah, I think it was competitive.
Before we pass to Jeff, we should say that you are the only coach in SEC history to win an SEC championship, an SEC tournament championship, and advance to the College World Series, both as a player and a head coach.
Yeah, I think that's going to be on my tombstone at some point.
So, John, that's impressive.
Well, I appreciate that.
All right. We're going to come back to you, John, because you're so impressive. Now, here he is, the man of the hour. How cold is it up there in Vermont right now, Jeff?
It's about 25.
We're warm right now, but go ahead.
About 25 degrees. I won't mention the wind chill, but we like it this way.
Tell us a little bit about you, Jeff Schulman.
Sure. Thanks, Donna, and thanks, Arnie, and thanks for all you doing a great job with these sports shows and professional staff in Philadelphia and all over, all this Maccabi at home programming has been amazing. So honored to be a part of it and honored to be on with John. I grew up in a place very similar to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Buffalo, New York. I was fortunate enough to attend the University of Vermont. John will be happy or not so happy to know that I was cut from the Vermont baseball team after a few days of tryouts. But I did play 4 years of hockey at UVM and had an amazing experience as a student athlete, and something that certainly sort of guided me into college athletic administration. One of the most fortuitous things that ever happened to me was that I was out of school for 5 or 6 years, and my father sent me a clipping of a notice in the Buffalo Jewish Review encouraging Jewish ice hockey players to try out for the Maccabi games in 1997. And I was fortunate enough to be selected to be part of that team. And that was my first sort of taste of what I think of as sort of the magic of Maccabi. And it was an amazing experience for me, as I think so many people probably on this call have experienced as well, to sort of be able to combine these two incredible or important parts of my identity, being Jewish and being an athlete, and to have that experience and be on a team of 20 other Jewish ice hockey players. I'd never had more than one teammate in my life up to that point, and to be at an opening ceremonies with thousands of other athletes from all over the world, all Jewish athletes, was just an amazing experience for me, and has led me to staying really involved with Maccabi. And I love this organization. My wife Deb, who's on this call, is super involved as well, and appreciate seeing some of my family members, my brother Roger and sister Erica, and brother-in-law Greg, and I won't go through everybody, but the Lichtenfeld side as well. Great to be on with everybody, and happy to talk about college athletics. If we come to any answers about any of the stuff that we're dealing with, John and I will have an edge on all of our colleagues, that's for sure.
Without a doubt, but we are, because I just know you both now, and I know we'll get there. But let me just say this, Arnie, before we go to your question. Jeff served as the delegation head at 3 Pan American Maccabi games: 2011 in Sao Paulo, Brazil in 2007, in Buenos Aires, and no, wait, hold on. 2011 in Sao Paulo, 2007 in Buenos Aires, and 2003 in Santiago, Chile. And you were the 2009 overall team manager of the United States delegation for the 18th Maccabi Games. So that is true love, dedication, volunteer effort. You and your wife, Deb, are just amazing. And the other thing I just also wanted to mention is that Jeff has really been involved overall in elevating UVM in so many ways. He's only the 4th athletic director, I believe, in their history. But I was really taken to know that he was the sports supervisor for field hockey and women's hockey programs, and previously served a 5-year term on the NCAA Division I Women's Soccer Committee, and has chaired and participated on several America East and ECAC committees in a variety of sports. So you've always been out there leading in all the right and great ways. All right, Arnie.
All right, I'll take it. First of all, happy Hanukkah, everyone, and Jeff and John. It's really wonderful to have you with it, Jeff. You've been somebody that all of us involved in Maccabi, we're so appreciative of all of your leadership and help over the years. The 97 Maccabi, which was my first Maccabi, my only Maccabi, was kind of a bittersweet time, as we all know, because of the bridge collapse. But some welcome into the Maccabi family.
Yeah.
And John, I'm just down the highway from you in New Orleans, and lots of Bulldog fans down here. And for all these folks living in the East Coast, and they don't even know what the Egg Bowl's like, but I do. And there's nothing like the Egg Bowl. We'll get into that a little later. But, I'm going to jump in. I have to tell you, the last 48 hours has been incredible in intercollegiate athletics. From coaches jumping around to different jobs to all kinds of stuff. So why don't we start there? I mean, could you have anticipated Friday night to tonight that we'd have a new coach at LSU coming from Notre Dame? We'd have a coach going from Oklahoma to USC, and so many things all in between.
And what about University of Florida? Come on, University of
Billy
Florida.
Napier from Louisiana going to Florida, exactly. It's been unbelievable. I mean, just talk a little bit about, for both of you, what it's been like both as leaders and just sports fans watching what's happening. And I guess I'd ask you, I saw Brian Kelly's contract today, $95 million over 10 years. I mean, what does that mean for you as athletic directors? And, how high does that now set the bar, for coaches in football and other revenue sports?
John, I'll let you start. Just hits a little closer to home for you.
That's a lot to unpack. I will say this. I've only really lived in the Deep South. I did have a stop at Columbia, Missouri. But I will say the culture of athletics, especially at the collegiate level in the Deep South, is unlike anything anyone will ever experience. I think it's a combination of things, and I think it goes back a long period of time. Obviously in the Deep South, we don't have as many professional sports franchises as you do in the Northeast, and I think that really competes with the college scene in the Northeast or the Upper Midwest or even out West. In the Deep South, it is a religious experience to follow your team in the Deep South, and I think what I have seen that has just been incredible to me is people spend time they don't have. They spend money they don't have. They are emotionally invested in a way that's quite remarkable. And that is why there's an expectation that every one of these schools are going to have a high level coach who's probably going to make a ridiculously high salary. And I think if you got a lot of coaches together in the room and said, is this too much? I think they would all admit that there's not too much, but there is a market. The market dictates how much the coaches and, quite frankly, administrators make. And I think until it's regulated at a very high level, this is going to continue. And so I think when you have a coach at a Notre Dame who says, I can have access to the type of athletes that exist in the Southeastern Conference, I'm going to make that move. Is my path to win a national championship a little clearer at a place like LSU than it is Notre Dame? I think obviously Brian Kelly agrees with that. So I think the movement really just indicates that or reflects the market. And I think that we're in a unique time. I do think at some point in time, there will be a tipping point and it will go a different direction. I think the tipping point really is going to be affected though by our federal government. And I think they're going to get involved in this process. So I tried to be brief, but that's the way I see it at this moment.
Oh, that's good. I mean, that's really good. I mean, it's interesting that you have a $95 million coach's contract. When you look at the real data, though, only 2% of all football Division I, Power 6, I think there's 65 schools, make money. So it really does beg to question whether, and Jeff, and I love having both of you because you represent different points on the spectrum of collegiate athletics. But is the current financial structure, is the current system sustainable? Jeff?
Yeah. Well, I'll share a couple of thoughts. One is that when I see the types of contracts that have, and frankly, these numbers aren't new. They started a few weeks ago at Penn State and Michigan State. And I guess when I see some of these transactions, to me, it just sort of reinforces the how diverse Division I really is. I think when most people think about college athletics, particularly when they're thinking about pay for play and some of the Supreme Court rules, they're thinking about two sports really. One that in Vermont we don't play football, and the other that we play basketball at sort of a mid-major level. So it's really important to remember that even within Division I, there's 360 some odd schools, and there's some that have budgets of $7 or $8 million, and some that have budgets of $230 million, and certainly we're much closer to the 7 or 8 than we are to the 230. But I will say that there's a trickle down even to our level. There's pressure on us to compete in the marketplace. we're trying to be nationally competitive in certain sports. We're trying to have basketball programs that can compete at a high mid-major level. And there's dominoes that impact us. And so, if you had told me 10 years ago that we would be paying some of the salaries, even at a Vermont, that we're paying, I would have thought you were crazy. But, the question about is it sustainable is something that as athletic administrators, we're asking ourselves all the time. There's pressure to stay competitive, and that costs a lot in order to compete for the best coaches and have the best facilities or quality facilities and the resources that our student athletes need. And from a revenue standpoint, some revenue in college athletics is going up, certainly on the multimedia side for the conferences and schools that are in those types of negotiations. But there's a lot of revenue streams that aren't going up, particularly given the situation we've been in the last 20 months. So sustainability is a big issue, not only in college athletics, I think in higher education as a whole, and we're certainly part of that.
Hey, Jeff and John, we're going to get back to monetary issues because there's a whole lot of them that we need to deal with tonight. But I want to shift just a touch here and focus on the student athlete. And when you look at the changes that have been made with coaches over the last couple of days, sometimes I think the student athlete gets lost in this. You have one coach who literally left after one of the biggest games of the year with Bedlam. And obviously he knew he was going to USC, during the course of that game. And you have another coach who, because the media broke the story, had to text his players last night before he even met with them to let him know that he was moving on to LSU. Where is, I guess, the symmetry and the fairness to the student athlete, who, although you've liberalized the rules, we have a transfer portal now and one-time transfers, but there still are restrictions in student athletes of what they can do and what they can't. How do you see the fairness of that? And is there anything you can do about it?
Yeah, I think with the entrance of name, image, and likeness, I think that student athletes have a lot more opportunities. We have to remember also, the majority of our student athletes here at Mississippi State are not on full scholarships. They're not, because most of our sports are what we would call equivalency sport athletes. Our baseball team, just to give you a great example, our baseball program this year is probably going to grow somewhere between $5.5 and $6 million of revenue. And our average baseball player is on 41.7% of a full scholarship. So when I hear a Supreme Court justice talk about, these kids are not student athletes, they are more professional, I immediately go to, well, the NCAA is restricting our baseball players and how much scholarship aid we can give them. So I think name, image, and likeness has a chance to be beneficial to our student athletes. Certainly they have the freedom and the creativity to go out and make extra revenue. A lot of that depends on the state that you're in and the state law that exists. I know in our state, our kids have the right to do that, but there are some restrictions there. Maybe some of the most beneficial states to live in are the ones that don't have any laws that restrict any name, image, and likeness activities. So I do think that essentially we're at a breaking, again, as I mentioned, we're at a tipping point. Some things are going to change drastically. And I think for the student athletes who are in revenue producing sports, I think some things are really going to change dramatically over the next 4 or 5 years.
That's interesting because, first of all, NIL, for everybody or anyone who hasn't tuned in, NIL is name, image, and likeness. Started with the states, but then there, I think, a federal law that said that players have the opportunity now to make money on their own name, image, and likeness. One of the things that's roiling the markets and universities is that there is no consistency in execution. So every school at this point in time has the ability to interpret as they see fit. I don't know. I'm just curious from your perspective, John and Jeff, how are you handling? And first of all, how many deals have been done in your schools? Because I have some data on nationally what's been done. It's far smaller than any of us think it is, the way it's talked about. But I'm just curious, at your individual institutions, where are you with NIL?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so we like most schools, I think we require that the student athletes disclose any NIL agreements that they have, and we've had about 29. I think 29 is the last number that I saw. But we're not talking about thousands of dollars. We're talking about agreements with a local pizza place for gift cards. Really, some social media types of exposures. We really have not seen it explode in any way. And I think, like you said, Donna, I think it's much less prevalent than maybe people think or thought it would be. I think that the challenge for us is that they're really the guardrails that we sort of thought were going to be in place around not having it be pay for play, not having NIL as part of any sort of recruiting inducement really hasn't played out. The NCAA was really weakened by the Supreme Court ruling that came out, and I think is very, very cautious about limiting schools in any way. And so it really is a bit of a kind of a free for all right now, and I think that's concerning for all of us. When there really aren't rules around this stuff. But I think John can certainly speak for himself, but I think most of us in college athletics support NIL, support the idea that student athletes should be able to benefit from their name, image, and likeness, just like any other student. But I think we don't want it to turn into a employee-employer relationship and pay for play.
John?
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. I support name, image, and likeness. We currently have around 130 student athletes who have had anything from, as Jeff mentioned, a free burger as part of a, or free meal as part of a name, image, and likeness deal, all the way up to some student athletes. I think our largest one is around $20,000 at this point in time, which is pales in comparison to many around the country. When I talk to our compliance people at Mississippi State, who are excellent, by the way, just phenomenal, we differ in this area because my background is in the coaching recruiting area. And I think in some regards, they view this as a much ado about nothing. There's going to be a few kids around the country, a few student athletes who are going to get big deals and others won't. What we haven't done yet is gone through a full recruiting cycle. We have to remember, name, image, and likeness, at least in our state, is only 5 months old. And when people talk about keeping this out of the recruiting process, I have to say, I'm not going to say that that's laughable. I'm just going to say, in my view, as a former recruiter, that's impossible. Because if you walk into a parent's home and it's a highly decorated athlete who's being recruited by big time Division I schools, they're going to ask you the question and you have to come up with an answer. So if I'm at a home and somebody says, hey, John Cohen, tell us, are there name, image, and likeness deals available at Mississippi State? My answer to that's going to be, hey, we've been doing this 5 months, so there isn't a great history of it so far. But what I will tell you is there are kids who have gotten name, image, and likeness deals. Here are the third parties who have presented this to the kids and gone out and gotten these opportunities. And I can't guarantee you anything at our institution. I can tell you, though, that I can give you the numbers on all the kids who have had a deal. I can tell you how our state law works, but eventually this is going to creep into the recruiting process. And the reason these numbers are going to skyrocket is because there are going to be promises made to kids. And it might not be a specific amount, and it might not be a specific company or a specific alumni, but there are going to be promises made. And I think this is one of the dirty little secrets that's going to come from this. I don't know how you stop it. I don't know how you police it. And so far, at least, the NCAA has had an image of, we're going to see how this plays out over a longer period of time. And you mentioned the Constitutional Convention just a couple of minutes ago. That's not really part of it. There hasn't been a ton of discussion about name, image, and likeness and how that progresses forward and how it's policed in the future. So I think it's, I think it's going to take a while for us to fully realize where this is going.
I think that's probably true. Just so you know, a couple of facts that I heard earlier today was the average NIL deal is $500. Now you spread that out over thousands and thousands and thousands of athletes. The most athletes in any category is women's volleyball. And the highest paid athlete right now is an LSU gymnast. Interestingly enough, right? We're all waiting for the $1 million football player, which Nick Saban said it famously at a conference. What does this mean? It means my quarterback's going to get $1 million. It will take time probably to get there, John. But right now, at least some of the women athletes are having some benefits from this, which obviously, thank you, Donna Cohen. We are applauding. Arnie?
Yeah, I just want to quickly stay on that the NIL topic for a minute to both of you, because you both are in states that really dominate in many ways, the sports scene. You don't have a pro team in Mississippi. I don't think you have a pro team in Vermont. I would think it helps the student athlete to almost be in that environment, because look, Mississippi State in Mississippi is one of the two major institutions where, maybe there is an NIL opportunity. And same thing in Burlington and Vermont. Jeff, I would think UVM presents the best opportunity for a D1 student athlete. Is that maybe how you would see this? And if you had to answer that recruiting question, is that one of the answers you might give to a parent?
Jeff, you want to?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, certainly in our case, the fact that we're the only Division I school in the state of Vermont is something that we talk about a lot. There are professional sports in Vermont. So as John was talking about sort of SEC country earlier, I wouldn't compare Burlington, Vermont to an SEC town, but people certainly pay attention to what we're doing, and it translates into commercial opportunities for the athletic department as a whole, but also individually for student athletes. One of the things that we're all sort of curious about is to see whether NIL opportunities will take money away from sponsorships that athletic departments have been receiving in the past and have it go to individual student athletes. We haven't seen a lot of that in Burlington yet, but it'll be interesting to follow that. But yeah, there's no question, in a lot of respects, being the only show in town is beneficial in terms of media attention, spectator interest, but also in terms of NIL opportunities for student athletes.
Yeah, I would say, because we're in a rural area, I think we're at a little bit of a disadvantage, because we don't have Fortune 500 companies headquartered in our state. So, of course, we have fans, just like Ole Miss up the road has fans, just like Vermont has fans. But I think a lot of it is going to depend on geographically what your footprint looks like in terms of business. So, I think that's going to put us at a little bit of a disadvantage. I also think, we've talked about how this hasn't fully exploded yet. We also haven't, we just had our first signing period, and we haven't even had a football signing period yet at the Division I level. That comes up a little bit later on in December. But I can tell you that Mike Leach, our football coach, is on the road, and he is being asked about name, image, and likeness opportunities at our school almost everywhere he goes. So again, I don't think it's reached its full potential. We will get there. And when we get to that level, there's gonna have to be some guardrails on this issue, in my opinion, because if it doesn't, I think it's a case where the rich could easily get richer.
No doubt. It's almost like your coach has to show up with NIL deals in his pocket, right? And it's going to be, okay, Mississippi State guys, they got a car dealer for me for 20. Mississippi has a car deal for 25. I mean, all of a sudden now your recruiters, some of this makes more transparent some of the other kinds of payments that happen in college sports that we all know about but don't talk about. But it is troubling when you think about how are you going to monitor that kind of behavior and also manage expectations.
Certainly, and in our state, just to tell you, in our state, what you just described is a violation of state law, because you cannot be directly or indirectly involved with a name, image, and likeness deal of any kind. And our coaches have done a great job. They understand that. So they have to dance around a little bit and explain that, hey, here's the history. You're going to have to go to another source to get the history of what's happening on our campus with this, but I can't be directly or indirectly involved. So I think this is where state laws, and ours is very similar to Alabama's, which is very similar to Florida's, which is very similar to Texas. Really the states that are at a huge advantage at this point are the ones who do not have name, image, and likeness state laws.
Right. So Arnie, I'm just gonna jump here to football. And Jeff, I think 1974, was that the last year Vermont had football?
Yes.
Okay, so, and I just bring that up because it's so interesting. You have a thriving, successful athletic department, right? You're the top in your state, but you don't have football, and football consumes so much mind energy, so many dollars, and so much of the conversation right now. And so Jason Wormser, he just jumped right in. And you both have an opinion on this, I'm sure, because it is the discussion of the moment, which is the Knight Commission's report suggesting that FBS schools break from the NCAA in football only, which begins to actually foreshadow a disaggregation of football and perhaps basketball from, Power Five. I don't even know, Jeff, if it comes to your school, but I'm sure you have a perspective on football. And what do you guys think about what is it, 65 Power Five schools in football that would become their own entity?
Yeah, it's as you said, Donna, Vermont dropped football in 1974. It was it was a financial decision at the time. It was also 2 years after Title IX was passed, and I think Vermont was taking that really seriously and looking at proportionality in the undergraduate population and the participation opportunities for men and women, and took some of those funds and invested them in women's programs, which I think was a kind of a progressive decision at that time. And frankly, the level of football that our conference schools play, there's 4 schools in our conference that play FCS football. It's a very expensive venture with very little revenue associated with it. It's not SEC football. They're not distributing tens of millions of dollars from media contracts and bowl games. And that's not to judge those programs at all. I think they would say that football adds a tremendous amount to their campus, and so there's a lot of positives. For us, I think we're a healthier program without football than we would be with football. It allows us to stay competitive, and in several other programs, men's and women's. Both our men's and women's soccer teams won conference championships this past fall, which was fantastic. In terms of the Knight Commission, the Knight Commission is really interesting and can be very provocative, and I think throw out some really interesting ideas that get a lot of people in the college athletics enterprise thinking differently. I'd certainly be interested to hear John's perspective on it. I think from a financial perspective within the NCAA, the fact that none of the revenue that's generated by football stays within the NCAA. It's all kept within the football structure. And yet there are some expenses that are borne by the NCAA that are football related. So I think that's a bit, and some of the legal issues, frankly, are heavily influenced by football that end up costing the NCAA a lot of money. At the same time, the big football schools are the ones that are really driving the media contracts that drive the revenue within the NCAA. So, and it's really challenging when you get into, take football and maybe even basketball out of it. First of all, basketball, the NCAA tournaments for men and women are really special and magical. And I certainly wouldn't want to see those go away. And in many other sports, like ice hockey for us, and in skiing, we're competing with Power 5 schools at the same level. And so a full separation doesn't feel particularly interesting to us either. So I'll stop there and let John comment.
Yeah, I agree with almost everything Jeff said. In fact, the majority of it. I do think that football allows us to take care of our other sports in a way that is really important. I'll give you a great example. Our volleyball team is just one game away from winning a Southeastern Conference championship this year. Traditionally, the state of Mississippi has not been very good in the sport of volleyball. It's primarily been the upper Midwest, Northeast, far West, and beach areas. We have not been great in volleyball. I say this only because we just had a great year. We're ranked in the top 25. We're about to send our team to Washington, the state of Washington, to participate in a Division I, the tournament. But all of that is because of football. Our team took 4 chartered trips this year, meaning, they had their own airplane and they went to where they were, turned around, came right back, got to school the next day. All of that is provided by football. And so I think football sometimes is painted as this big, colossal thing that's out of control, but it's also providing a ton of opportunity for our other student athletes as well. And they benefit from that. And quite frankly, our student athletes get that. I mean, they really understand how that process works. So I think football is demonized in some ways. It's a beautiful sport. It's a sport steeped in tradition. There's no question that it's a violent sport as well. And I think that part has gotten a lot better as well. But I do think it offers some great benefits and has done a lot for college athletics in general.
Right, but and it has, and it does. And when you have Title IX, it certainly creates more opportunities for women because, I mean, the squad's what's on your team? 100 players? 90.
We have 85 scholarship football players, and we probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 total.
So you have to have 85 to balance that out. But going back to Jason's question, do you believe that that the football is going to break away?
I think at some level, when there's an inequity, change is inevitable. I do see that happening. Is it a year away? Is it 5 years away? Is it 10 years away? I don't know. But it's extremely difficult to when certain schools have certain resources to compare them to other schools that don't have the same types of resources and can't be competitive at that level. So yeah, I think that the evolution of this thing dictates that there will be some change.
Yeah, there's definitely momentum on this one, Arnie. Well, even when you first hear these crazy things, you're like, oh, it's not going to happen. But there's genuine momentum behind this, and it will be interesting to see. But Jeff brings up a really great point, which is the distribution of dollars, which are incredibly significant. The Power Five, they hold on to all the money, and that probably can't stay that way either. So lots to be discussed in the next couple of months as all these things continue to roil. Arnie?
Yeah, let's, one of the most interesting things you just said, we talked about football, but I think both of you could speak to this. It's been an interesting evolution the last decade or so to watch kind of some emerging revenue sports. John, through your tremendous leadership in baseball and, fellow coaches like Ron Polk and Skip Bertman and others, baseball, at least in the South, baseball has become a revenue generating sport, I think, for the major schools. And Jeff, I believe in your neck of the woods, Division I hockey is really interesting because I grew up with the University of Wisconsin, and that program has been incredible in hockey for years and years. But how fun is it to watch now some of the Sun Belt schools, in Arizona State, or some of the Big Ten schools that never had hockey, joining the sport. And I presume that also is now a revenue generating on a positive level sport. And I guess I would ask you, how do you feel about that? And what might be next? What might be the next sport that comes into that category of actually making money for the universities?
Yeah, I think hockey is an interesting example of a somewhat regionalized sport, although, as you said, Arnie, it is expanding in Arizona State, and there's Alabama Huntsville has been going at Division I hockey for a long time, the Alaska schools. And it is a really important sport in the Northeast, and it generates significant revenue. It's also a unique sport in that it's a good example of a sport where, the biggest of the big Power Five schools, Notre Dame and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio State, compete side by side with Minnesota Duluth and Lake Superior State and St. Lawrence and Clarkson and Vermont. And, that's a special thing about college athletics, that when people talk about the Power Five sort of breaking away as a collective, I think concerns a lot of people. I mean, frankly, there wouldn't be enough Power Five hockey schools to maintain proper sports sponsorship. So, and in different regions, there's other sports. Volleyball, as John talked about, is really big and successful. Gymnastics can be a significant revenue generating sport at certain programs. So, I think it's, certainly in Vermont, we're very dialed into the fact that college athletics is much bigger than football and basketball. And I'm sure John feels the same way as an athletic director. Even though those two sports take up, a lot of the public's attention, we're managing all of our sports and attending to each of them.
All right, Arnie, I'm just going to go to the questions here in the chat because Rick Balfour clearly is interested in swimming. And John, he wants to know, is there any interest, possibility of a swim team at MSU? Because he has a daughter, and all she can swim at is either Delta State or Millsaps. And of course, if this doesn't work out, she wants to know if she can walk on at Vermont. Okay, that's coming next. Jeff, all right, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was just going to say, of course, we'd love to have swimming. We'd love to have gymnastics. We have 16 sports. We have 9 female sports and 7 male sports. The challenge we have is, and I've mentioned this before, we compete in the Southeastern Conference, right? So if you look at our league and sports like gymnastics and swimming and tennis and golf and volleyball and everything else, it's highly competitive. If you add additional sports at a place like Mississippi State, and I'm very proud to say this, we, out of 14 schools in our league, and we're soon to have 16 teams in our league, or schools in our league, we probably have the lowest athletic budget of them all. Wow, and we still have to be competitive. So we're going to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of about $110, $115 million this year on intercollegiate athletics, where nationally folks would say, man, that's a lot of money. And then I look to our east about 80 miles and of course they might double what we're going to spend on intercollegiate athletics, and we still have to be competitive with them and everything. So in adding additional sports, what it could do is dilute the success of many of our other sports that are highly competitive in the Southeastern Conference. Our tennis teams have been phenomenal. Our golf teams have been very, very good. Our women's basketball team has played for a national championship twice in the last 5 years. Our baseball team just won a national championship. Our softball team has been to a regional final 4 out of the last 5 years. Again, as I mentioned, our volleyball team is playing at a very high level. If you introduce another sport, it could take away from what those sports are doing. And that's probably the only reason why we haven't been able to add additional sports.
John brings up, I think, a really good point about, and it's been one of the realities of college athletics over the past 25, 30 years as it's become more and more expensive to stay competitive. I think as athletic directors, we believe in the benefits of participating in competitive college athletics and would love to provide as many opportunities as possible, but you're balancing that against financial realities and competitive realities. And I've always thought there was an opportunity, even within Division I, for almost like low cost opportunities. So almost like a hybrid of a club and a varsity, where a sport like baseball for us is a good example. We had baseball, we dropped it. I love baseball. The community loves baseball and softball. And if we had an opportunity to play that at a sort of a low cost varsity level and align with other schools that were doing the same, and not necessarily try to compete with Mississippi State, but compete with other schools in the Northeast, I think there's opportunities there. And it's something that I think about as we all are thinking about what Division I athletics is going to look like going forward. That's a piece that's very much in my mind. To Rick's specific question, I think it was Rick who asked about walking on. And in this COVID environment, it's a unique time. It's really difficult right now for seniors in high school and juniors or people who came out last year because of this extra year of eligibility that everybody has, and all the transferring that's going on. And I think a lot of coaches are are struggling to kind of understand what their rosters are going to look like and what opportunities they may have. So just want to acknowledge that. In terms of advice, I think I always encourage young prospective student athletes to don't be shy about pursuing coaches. In getting your name in front of them, and even if they don't respond the first time or the second time, be tenacious about it. And it says a little something to the coach, and you never know when you might catch them. And make sure you're copying not only the head coach, but all the assistant coaches and maybe the operations person, anybody you can find an email for. Make sure you're trying to communicate, make phone calls. Maybe you'll catch them in the office, but be persistent about it, and make sure that they know that you're serious about their school, because coaches don't want to waste their time on somebody that's not serious about them. And if you're willing to walk on and come without a scholarship, make sure they know that too, because that can be really important in terms of what they're looking at. But it is a challenging time, and I feel for young people that are looking to come out of high school right now and enter college. There just aren't as many opportunities as there are in a typical cycle.
That's great. That's really great advice for anybody watching, that might have a son or daughter looking to play intercollegiate athletics, is just persevere. I mean, just communicate and talk and show that interest, and you never know where it goes. So, John, I'm going to blame you on this one. So we have seen yet another round of conference reaffiliation, okay? And I think it all started, obviously, with the SEC and Oklahoma and Texas, but the domino effect of that, of all of these mid-majors that, lost members, and then they go after another conference. Wow, where does that all end? And, do we get to a point one day where there are literally 2 super conferences and everybody else 3? Donna's telling me 4 and everybody else, goes in a different direction. But talk a little bit about what the Texas-Oklahoma addition means to the SEC, and how do you look at conference expansion from that?
Well, I think anything that expands your brand is worthwhile and advantageous. I think those 2 schools were attracted to our league. We didn't recruit them. They were attracted for a reason. Maybe it has to do with the resources of our league. Maybe it has to do with a path toward a national championship in several sports. Maybe it's a geographic footprint reason. But I do, I do think the SEC has been, painted a little bit too much as the Darth Vader and all of this. All of us, and I'm sure Jeff included, when you become the athletic director, there's a little starter kit, right? So you have to wear the certain clothes to be an athletic director. I'm being facetious here, but you also have the little card that you give all of your employees and staff and say, here's what our goals are. Or, we want our kids to have a great experience. Well, in the SEC, in order to have a great experience, you have to have funding for that to happen. I mean, so you have to, do a great job with fiscal management. Well, we want to provide for all of our sports. And in order to do that, it takes resources. Thank goodness. I mean, we're in a situation in the Southeastern Conference where it does provide resources for all of our kids to have great experiences. But you can have a great experiences without having a ton of resources, but you can't if all the schools you're competing against don't have the same resources. So I think that was one of the reasons why all of this has happened. I think realignment in many cases is about the reassessment of resources for like-minded schools. And I think in that way, the reshuffling of the deck is advantageous for all.
That's really, and I've heard that a lot, like this whole concept of alignment of interests. So I have to listen, there's a lot more we can talk about here, but I do have to address this community that comes together, this mishpacha, if you will, this family, and we all have our antenna up for Jewish athletes. Whether we've been a Jewish athlete or we're a fan of Jewish athletes, wherever we go, we're like, okay, who's Jewish and playing sports? So as 2 ADs at 2 very different schools, first of all, what percentage of your athletes are Jewish, and how aware of them do you become once they enter your programs?
Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what percentage of our athletes are Jewish. At UVM in general, it's about 20% of the student body, which is, really a healthy percentage, certainly higher than the percentage in the state of Vermont. I'm looking at one of our greatest Jewish athletes ever right in my screen, my friend Barry Stone, who's a former basketball player at UVM, Maccabi tennis player, and a great fan and supporter of our teams. So he certainly comes to mind. But it's interesting. I also, I certainly, there's times where I'll approach one of our Jewish student athletes and just have a conversation with them. I often bring up Maccabi and opportunities through there, but I'm also cautious because sometimes they're not Jewish, and I want to be careful about making any sort of assumptions. But it is a unique thing as a Jewish athletic director. That's certainly on my radar, and my Maccabi involvement has been a big part of that. And I'm always excited and proud when there's a Jewish student athlete, and not uncommon for Deb and I to have them over to the house for a night of Hanukkah or Passover, another holiday.
That's so nice. How about you, John?
Well, my wife and I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, helped to create a Hillel on our campus. And I think that the most students we've had in the Hillel were 30 out of 23,000 students. So there's not a lot of us. We haven't had I honestly can't remember a Jewish athlete at our institution. But that doesn't necessarily mean we haven't had Jewish kids. Jeff brings up an interesting subject. You're not going to just walk up to a kid and ask them if they're Jewish. I will say this though, and this is just by Wikipedia, so it's got to be right. But when I was watching the World Series, the Braves playing against the Houston Astros, I think there were 3 Jewish kids playing in the World Series, which might be an all-time high. So I thought that was pretty cool. Bregman was one of those guys with Houston, and of course Max, what's his name, the left-hander for the Braves.
Yeah,
yes.
The highest paid player in baseball as of yesterday is going to the Mets.
Yes. So I think 3 confirmed Jewish kids playing in the World Series. I was pretty excited about that.
That was pretty amazing. And Max Fried was a Maccabi athlete from a few years ago. So I want to ask you, I want to keep it personal. Both of you, both as players and coaches, have had incredible moments. And I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you. I want everybody else to hear it. What was the greatest sporting moment that you had as either a coach or as an athlete in your collegiate career? Jeff, why don't you start? I think I know the answer to yours, but why don't you go and answer?
Because I'm not sure I know the answer to mine.
Well, it deals with an Ivy League school.
Oh, you're talking about I scored 6 goals in my college hockey career. I was what they called the stay-at-home defenseman, which is another way of saying I didn't score a whole lot, but I did happen to score one of them at the Boston Garden against Harvard in an ECAC championship semifinal. That was a big deal for me. I'm not sure that was my greatest moment. When I think about the moments that really stand out for me as a college student athlete, and certainly as an athlete, I would put them Maccabi very high on that list. But as a college student athlete, I think about some of the moments playing at home in front of our crowd. UVM hockey, some of you know, plays at a historic building called Gutterson Fieldhouse. That's just a really special atmosphere, packed to the brim, and just great fans, great energy, and playing in front of your fellow students is something that's really meaningful. So those are the moments that I think about.
I guess I'd have 2, one as a player and one as a coach. As a player, I was fortunate enough at Mississippi State to be on a team that went to the College World Series in 1990. And this is kind of the strangest situation I've ever been in my life. We lose to Stanford and we're eliminated from the College World Series. And I don't know if I've ever been that down because of an athletic situation in my life. I'm on the bus. We just were eliminated. We're about to go back to the hotel, and an assistant coach turned around and said, "Hey, John, I just want you to know you were just drafted by the Minnesota Twins." So I went from being the lowest of the low to the highest of the high. Just to tell you how much things have changed, I didn't even know the draft was going on. I didn't even know the draft was on that day. We were playing in the World Series, and a coach told me you were just drafted by the Minnesota Twins. So that was a phenomenal feeling. As a coach, there's no question what that moment was. When I went to the University of Kentucky, they had been to one regional, NCAA regional, in the 100-year history of the program. And when I went there on my interview, Mitch Barnhart, who's one of my mentors, one of the great men in all of college athletics, just spawned so many athletic directors around the country, a great man. He looked me in the eye and said, "Can we be competitive in baseball at Kentucky? Can we just be competitive? Do we have to finish in last place over and over and over again?" And I looked him dead in the eye and I said, "Yes, I think we can be competitive." Left dinner, and my wife Nell says to me, "Can we be competitive at the University of Kentucky?" And I looked her right in the eye and I said, "Nell, I don't know." But 3 years later, at that point in time, we've been in the SEC, Kentucky being in the SEC for 70 years. And 3 years later, we won an SEC title. And we were at the University of Georgia, had a little left-hander on the mound. He struck out a kid from the University of Georgia, and we were SEC champions at the University of Kentucky. And that was probably, in terms of my own children, outside of my children being born and being married, that was probably the most special moment of my life when that happened.
Great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Before we close it up, I just want to, first of all, for anybody that loves hockey or loves sports in general, get up to Burlington and go to that field house. Jeff was kind enough to invite me up there one night for a game, and it is a really special place, and the kind of venue that, that we don't see all that often, in sports anymore. And John, I have to ask you, my first event that I ever attended involving Mississippi State was a bowl game because I went to Northwestern. I've never heard cowbells like I heard that night. How in the world does the NCAA or SEC allow you to have cowbells all night long at your football games?
Well, one of my best friends in the world is a gentleman named Scott Strickland, who's the athletic director at Florida. Yeah. And our president, Dr. Mark Keenum, who's been here now for 11 years, I think it was 9 years ago. I don't know how it happened. They went into a room for meetings at the SEC, and they emerged with us having the ability to use cowbells at our football games and other sporting events. And it was a miracle because it was outlawed up until that time. It's a Mississippi State tradition. And one of the coolest things about Mississippi State to me is the tradition says that you cannot buy your own cowbell. You will have 100 years of bad luck if you buy a cowbell for yourself. You have to buy a cowbell for someone else. And you will have good luck if you buy someone else a cowbell. And that's the tradition of Mississippi State. So every time we hire someone in the athletic department, the first thing they get is a cowbell from me, welcoming them to Mississippi State University. It's a great tradition and something we're awfully proud of.
That's great.
So John, let me just say this, because it is Hanukkah, and I haven't seen cowbells on any of the best idea lists, but hearing you talk about it, we're going to send you all our names and numbers, our addresses. You have 4 nights to get us our cowbell. And then when we reconvene at some point, which we will, because we would like to actually ask you to be our official collegiate experts, because we know that change is going to continue to come. We'd love to have you guys back. That would be wonderful. We want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. This will for our official Hanukkah Maccabi USA show, Arnie, right?
Yes.
I hope to see Jeff Schulman in Israel. We're both slated to go December, not together, but maybe there we'll get to see each other. Fingers crossed that this COVID new variant passes, everyone stays healthy. We will resume this wonderful sports show, right, Arnie? after the new year?
Yeah, I think after the
I
new
can't
year.
stand to
which
be
is-
away from you for that long.
Oh, thank
We'll have
you.
to practice. We'll do a practice show or something, okay?
That'll work.
Okay.
We will have some great guests in the new year and leading Maccabi at home all the way up to Israel. And so we invite all of you to join us in 2022. But since we won't see you until then, we wish you a very happy and a healthy and a meaningful new year. And may you all be well and stay healthy from COVID. And let's all get back to a sense of normalcy in the new year.
Arnie, if I
Check
could,
your
if I
mail.
could-
Check your mail for the cowbells. Seriously. Thank you so much for that, John. I appreciate
Donna,
it.
Arnie,
And Random Mississippi State, it's okay. Put
Go on,
Vermont.
Jeff, go on.
yeah, I just want to again thank you both for having me on, and John, it's a pleasure to be on with you, and thank everybody for joining on. And I did want to say a special hello to two of my great friends and Maccabi mentors, Roy Solomon and Bob Spivak, who are on. I see on my screen. It's great to be on with the two of you, and hope to see you both in person sometime soon. But Arnie, Donna, thank you both for doing such a great job as hosts.
No, thank you guys for being so wonderful, open, and sharing. We appreciate it. And listen, Jeff, if you come up with the Hanukkah gift from the University of Vermont, we're good with that too. Okay.
Well, I was thinking we have a lot of cows here, not as many cowbells maybe.
Oh, he needs them for the herd, John. He needs them for the herd. That can work out great. Everyone be well.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Go
much.
Dogs.
Thank you,
Go
Jeff.
Dogs.
Thanks.
See you in Atlanta Saturday, John.